Welcome back to Built to Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping real AI products into the world. I'm your host, Tyler Postal from Voker, and today I'm excited to be joined by Conor, co-founder of Hyperspell. And it's an interesting kind of flipping the script here. Hyperspell is actually a development tool and a resource for people building AI agents. So it'll be interesting to kind of take it to the other side. Conor, it's great to have you here.
Great to be here, Tyler. Looking forward to the conversation.
Amazing. Well, let's start with the basics. What were you doing before Hyperspell, and how'd you meet your co-founder, and how'd you get the idea?
Sure. So this is my second company. My first company was bootstrapped. I was building a company doing AI for music, actually, AI tools for music production.
Cool.
Music has always been a side passion and hobby for me. But the reason that I decided to start Hyperspell instead is, I spent a number of years working as a PM at different companies, and I found that there was a lot of busy work as part of my job and a lot of time just spent moving information from one team to another and copying and pasting data into different formats. And so with all these new agents coming out, decided, well, it'd be great to have an agent that could solve that busy work for me. So I met my co-founder Manu through the On Deck Fellowship, and we bonded over this idea of an agent to solve your busy work that can work on your behalf and knows everything about your organization and the people in your company and the context and what's happening. Now, the two of us started building this agent, but we found something really interesting in the process. We found that the agent was absolutely useless without, number one, without memory to remember the things that it was learning and the people it was talking to. But number two, we all have this tacit knowledge of the companies that we're in. Who's in the company, what are the projects, who are the customers, what are our products, even what do acronyms mean? Now, we call this a context graph within the company. And we realized that our agent was useless without that, because even though the agent had been trained on all the data of the world, the models are not trained on the data for your specific company. They don't know the world inside of your company. And so we started building infrastructure for ourselves to get this context graph from across the entire company and give our agent memory. And in the process of doing that, we realized, wait, this is a huge problem. And every single other founder building AI agents, especially in the workplace, is going to run into the same problem. This is something that every single one of them is going to need. And so why don't we build that instead and have that be our startup? And that was the genesis of Hyperspell and how it all began.
Amazing. I love that. Reminds me of like the Slack story and countless other like successful companies where it's like you're building something for yourself just because you're really capable and knowledgeable engineers in the space, and you realize, oh, other people could leverage this, technology as well. Well, I'm super excited to get into it because I'm sure you've seen a lot by working with a lot of different agent companies. We sit in a similar seat, and it's always, I feel like we're pretty lucky to get to see like how are different teams building, where are the challenges, because it's the space is in a place where we're all learning and growing. So why don't we get into, exactly. Maybe at a high level, tell us like, what is memory? Why do we need it? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I want to talk about two things. So the first one is the agent's memory itself. So LLMs by their nature are stateless. So if you are having a conversation with ChatGPT or Claude or any other model, what it's actually doing is sending your question to the LLM, and then maybe it puts the prior responses into the context window. And so an LLM is taking that information within the context window and then formulating a response. Now, there's two problems with this. Number one is that context window is limited. And even if it's published that, okay, the context window size is, let's say, 1 million tokens, it turns out there's something called the effective context window, which is how much information you can put into the context window before the performance starts going down. And it's much, much, much smaller than the published context window. So if it says, we find it's generally between 10 and 20%, depending on the model, of the stated context window. So if they tell you, oh yeah, we can handle 1 million tokens, in reality, when you start going from 10 to 20%, especially beyond 20%, your performance is getting worse the more information you give it. That's a problem, right? And then the moment that you switch to a new instance, okay, great. Now your context window is clean. Now it forgets everything that you had in the prior context window and everything you were talking about. And so we realized pretty quickly that you need an external source of information for the models so that they can reference it and have enough context for each individual conversation. Now, the critical thing here is that source of context for the model can only be so large, right? It has to fit within this small fraction of the context window. And so just like with people, we all have context windows too. We all can only remember so many things at once. You need the right information at the right time and nothing more than that. It's very important. Too much information is actually a bad thing. So that was the first problem that we saw. The second problem is, okay, great. It has, an agent has memory. It can remember things about context. There's all this kind of ambient context about, let's say you're at a company and, what are my company's priorities? What is our projects? What is our roadmap? What are our standing operating procedures? You don't want to need every single person to feed in all that data manually into the model just to have it give useful information. You want it to just kind of ambiently know that, just like an employee would at the company. And so we realized that, number one, you need a context graph that the LM can plug into that instantly gets all this context, but it also needs to supplement that over time with new things that it's learning from you, the user. And happy to talk through a few examples of what that looks like for our customers.
No, this is amazing. Yeah, I want to take a second just to you're really speaking my language. I think the past day or two, I was talking to a couple different guests on the pod, and I think I've been kind of trying to figure out a way to communicate this clearly to folks who aren't as deep in the AI space. And so I want to test these on you and see if you agree. Another way to maybe explain context window would be like an attention span. And so this is how much the LM can keep in its head at a given time. If you give it too many instructions, I have never heard that term of effective context window. I really like that. That's a good way of describing that. Even if your attention span's pretty wide, you're not always going to be able to hit your maximum attention span, right? And the second thing that I've been kind of chatting with other folks on the pod about is that even if context windows grow, even if attention span grows, as a human, you don't keep you can work, maybe for a test, you memorize a bunch of things and you keep it in your head. But over time, it's better to have notes written down that you can refer to when you need them. And so I think those themes, it sounds like you're saying the same thing, which I'm always glad to kind of be validated. Yeah. Is there anything you'd correct there, or do you think that's a decent enough analogy?
That's exactly how you think about it. At some point, there's a reason we as people write things down, right?
Totally.
In the invention of writing was pretty transformational for a reason. And so for LLMs, you need the same thing. And also because then it makes it auditable. Mm-hmm. If it's an external source of memory and context, you as a person can look at that and be like, oh no, actually, my name is spelled wrong, or you got this detail wrong, or this needs to be updated. Versus what's going on inside the model itself, who knows?
Totally.
You don't have visibility into that.
Yeah, you can see, someone asked about, something about HR policy, but right. They didn't have the agent didn't have that in its context, in its memory, in its notes, right? What are the most common missing pieces of information that you're seeing across your customers? Or what are themes of the type of information that isn't available to the agent that it needs or isn't in memory?
I think the first category is information about customers. So we have a number of customers that are this new term, agentic CRMs, where a normal CRM, you need to go through and you need to manually enter in, okay, here's a company, this is what they do, this customer. Turns out normal CRMs as a source of data are terrible. People, they require humans to update them and edit them and change them. And there's all kinds of stale data there. And we just, as humans, we're not very good at this. It's trying to treat people like machines, where your whole job is to move context into there. And if you talk to any salespeople, they hate entering data into CRMs. They really despise it. There's so many conversations that happens among sales leaders where the whole focus is just getting better data in CRM. Well, it turns out that all that information about the customer exists in other places. It's in your meeting notes. It's in the emails that the customers are sending to you. It's on their website. You can learn about what the customer is doing. Maybe you have a Slack channel with the customer. And so the first use case that's become really popular, and I want to give a shout out to one of our customers here, Micro, who is building exactly this, is an agentic CRM. So it creates a context graph of all of the different customers that you have, and then learns everything about that customer. So it knows what are the deals that you've signed with them? What does the company do? What are all the meetings you've had with them? What are any concerns they had? And the critical thing is it records all of this based on the data that it has without a person going in and needing to manually enter
That's
it.
huge.
Yeah, which is, if you talk to any salesperson, this is a game changer for how sales is done.
Totally. Being a founder, I've had to learn how to do sales, and my background's in data science analytics. So like, I want to keep the CRM and the data up to date, but it takes a lot of time and effort. So I'm very bullish on AI CRMs. The one I use is called Lightfield, and I think all of these AI tools need that layer of memory. So it's super helpful, for you to share your insight there of like what you're seeing in the market. What would you say are the big categories of like agent companies, like the type? Is it B2B? Is it B2C, that are like advancing the fastest in terms of the quality or the accuracy or the capability of their agent?
Oh man. I mean, there's many different categories. I think this like workplace agent category of like whether it's agentic CRMs or like emails for agents. Another one of our customers is a company called Agent Mail that's building emails for agents, and we're working on some really exciting features with them that utilize all this context we're going to be announcing later. But they're building kind of agent native tools where it's email agents are able to use emails and send emails and receive emails in a way that Gmail couldn't do previously. I think the agents have been a like single player productivity experience so far, but advancing to the point where agents are actually like a coworker in your company is where we're seeing a huge amount of value and a huge amount of excitement. And Tyler, it's interesting, going to your point before, as a founder, you've had to become a salesperson. Nobody gets into sales because they wanted to update Salesforce.
Yeah.
That's not, no salesperson, that's not what gets them out of bed every day, right? That's not what gets them excited to do the job. That's just data entry. We were meant for more than that. And I think the pieces for me, like I love helping customers win. And what's most exciting is that our customers are empowering their users to focus on the thing that they actually wanted to do and that they were actually excited about and actually good at. And the reason we created, we called it Echo AI at the time when we were building our own agent. The reason we built that agent was to solve busy work. And I think one thing I've really enjoyed about this is now we get to have so much more impact in solving that busy work through our many, many, many customers that are building these agents.
I love that.
Still the same mission, just much wider than we were before.
I love that. Yeah. And to build on that, I think in general, on one hand, I love that so many companies are getting into building agents. They're spinning up teams or training people, but at the same time, it's kind of like the e-commerce problem where back in the day, you had to build your own website, your own database, your own logistics system. Now you use Shopify. I think, we're going to need these development tools like Hyperspell to make it a lot easier for everyone to build agents and not figure out like why should everyone figure out the integrations and how to store the data, et cetera. So it's great that there's players like you guys that are making that more accessible. On that note, I'm curious, like, what is, building integrations across all these different sources, collecting that data in a way that, and storing it in a way that works well for an agent, and then figuring out what information to give the agent at the right time. That's a complex problem. How much of that is AI powered in and of itself, or is it mostly like a traditional software problem, which I think there's a lot more traditional software problems in agents than people realize. It's not all just have an LLM do it. There's a reason that we need to, plug them in and give them the right info. But tell me.
Yeah, I mean, our customers are extremely talented and they have amazing engineering teams that are really strong. And, with enough time and energy and resources, could they figure out how to connect to Slack and pull in data from Slack, and Gmail, and Google? Absolutely. No question of that. The question for them is this their differentiator? Is this the thing that you have limited time and energy and resources, and your competition is biting at your heels, and you want to conquer the market as fast as possible? Do you want to spend weeks and months figuring out exactly how the Slack API works and how to work around the rate limits and send data, retrieve data, the indexing of it, the parsing of data, and your memory structure? Or do you want that to just work immediately, and then you can focus on the things that your customers care about? Because your customers, this is just infrastructure. It's just giving the right information to the agent. That's not usually the thing. I mean, it needs to work well, but it's not usually a differentiator for the customers. And so we find that that in building this, it's a mixture of both. So a lot of our work is traditional software, right? It's like, okay, there's an API available. How do you connect with the API? How do you manage rate limits? Things like that. But then once you get that data, a huge part of it is actually a combination of LLMs and then also classical NLP techniques. So my co-founder has been in machine learning for 15 years, and he actually dropped out of a PhD program where he was studying cognitive neuroscience to understand how human beings remember and store and process information, and then got into machine learning, self-taught coder, everything, because he wanted to take that knowledge and apply it to machines instead. And so we have many debates within Hyperspell of like, how does the human brain do this? How do we store information? How do we categorize it? Even like philosophical questions about like, what is true in a company? What is not true? Now, the traditional software piece is, yes, absolutely. Like we connect to all these data sources. We work with the rate limits. But then the place where it gets really exciting is we are using AI for almost everything downstream of that. So for example, as we bring in data, we create a knowledge graph out of it. Then we have a file system. We have a graph structure underneath the file system. And figuring out how to categorize that, how to summarize it. We do something called entity extraction using classical NLP techniques where we can say, hey, this Tyler that I'm talking to now is the same Tyler in my emails. It's the same Tyler in my CRM. People do this great. It turns out it's actually really difficult for machines to do. And so you can do that, again, using LLMs. And the place where we're most excited about using it is traditionally dev tools and infrastructure required a human being to write code to integrate the product. But what we're finding more and more is the future of software engineering is agents, not humans. And so we created a Claude Code skill so that you can integrate Hyperspell into your product without writing a single line of code. You just have Claude Code, use the skill, takes under 5 minutes, and then it's part of your product immediately. We also are looking into ways for agents to be able to buy Hyperspell directly. To just from your Claude Code, you see a pop-up like, hey, I see that you need memory for what you're building. Click here, integrate Hyperspell, add it in. I think that the buyers of the future are agents, not people, and that's very much a future we want to build it for. We think about instead, UX is not just humans; it's also AX, agent experience.
I love that. Awesome. Well, I also wanted to ask, as someone who knows what's possible with agents, like you guys have seen how agents can improve with better memory, with better design, etc. What's your biggest pet peeve if you're ever using a chatbot or an agentic product out there? Is it something like, wow, it didn't remember this thing, and I know if they're using Hyperspell, it would just remember it? What's your biggest pet peeve with agents today?
Yeah, I think context is the biggest problem that I find with agents, where it leads to conclusions and makes assumptions about things that aren't necessarily true. And it's so frustrating when you tell an agent something and then it forgets it, and then you have to reiterate it again, and then it does this, and then it's like, oh, you're absolutely right. Yes, I should. And it's like, dude, just remember this. It's like having, working with LLMs sometimes, it's like a genius brainiac that just graduated from a PhD program but has amnesia and forgets everything and is kind of clueless and over assumes things. It's like the smartest inexperienced intern you've ever worked with. And so that's the biggest thing, is bringing in nuance into what it's doing and having the agent understand what the user is actually trying to do here and understand the context of how it's operating in, and then remember that over time. It's a huge pet peeve of mine, and it's not that hard to solve. Again, every time I use a product, I'm like, guys, you should just use Hyperspell. This is you can avoid this. It creates unnecessary friction for users that you really shouldn't need to have.
Totally agree. So it sounds like there's two main things you highlighted there. It's number one, understand the intent of the user. And then number two, make sure you have the right memory to give you the right context to solve that problem. Yeah, I imagine Hyperspell solves the second one. Do you see anything, what do you see people doing to properly, sorry.
Yeah, I think a lot of really good prompting. So I would, I would test your prompts heavily and make sure that your models are not overfitting the data. I think sometimes, I don't know, we see this with meeting note takers, that they'll assume next steps when things are not actually next steps. Or they'll make it just overfit things. And so I think building in nuance into your prompts is really important. Having them understand subtlety, having them not jump to conclusions and make assumptions is really important. These models will run wild if you let them, but like oftentimes reining in what they do and having it make fewer assumptions and be more clear about when it doesn't have high confidence is even more valuable. Like confidently saying the right answer does not help anyone. And I see so many products that do that where it's extremely confident and wrong. And so making sure that your agent is not jumping to conclusions, that it knows how little context it has. It's like treating it like an overconfident intern. I think you can do a lot of that through prompting and then also building a really good harness for it that it doesn't run too far ahead.
Amazing. Well, I could keep chatting forever, but I know we're close to time. I want to put Hyperspell's website up on the screen. Share with the audience, who should check out Hyperspell? How do they try it out? How do they follow along?
Yeah. So I think anyone building agents that need context from across an organization and or memory should use us, which is pretty much everyone building agents. So this is a universal problem. It's a fundamental limitation of the model, and that's why we started the company. You can book time with us at hyperspell.com. You can reach out to me directly on Twitter or LinkedIn, Conor Brendan Burke, or email me at conor@hyperspell.com.
Amazing. Conor, thanks for taking the time. I hope folks check out Hyperspell. It's been a great conversation. We'll have to have you on for another episode. I'm sure you'll have more to share next time. For everyone listening, thanks for listening to Built to Ship. If you're building something, go ship it. See y'all next time.
See you later.